June 6, 1915, 1:50 a.m., above Ghent. A single-seat Moran Saulnier parasol claws at the night. The pilot, Flight Sublieutenant Reginald Warneford of the Royal Naval Air Service, can see the glow of an airship's engine cars through patches of cloud. The enemy is a hydrogen giant, LZ-37, drifting west to hunt cities asleep and troop columns on the move. One man, 6 20-pound bombs, an engine that coughs when he needs it most. He nudges the nose up. The altimeter creeps. The Zeppelin holds the high ground. He aims to steal it. One foreshadowing thought. Hydrogen doesn't forgive mistakes. By dawn, people will repeat a simple line that travels faster than any aircraft. One airplane destroyed a Zeppelin in the air. For months, airship raids had been a promise and a threat. Now they were routine. Not hours, but minutes to take cover when the sound came. Towns on the Channel coast flinched. London lit the first blackout drills in its history. And over Flanders, the new arithmetic of war hung in the sky. A single airship could carry nearly 2 tons of bombs. A frontline aircraft like Warneford's could carry barely a handful. Zoom out. The lines run from Newport to the Swiss border, a scabbed trench map of Europe in stalemate. The thin strip of coast around Dunkirk hosts Arnas detachments with mixed machines, seaplanes, land planes, improvisations with wires and hope. At Saint-Pol-sur-Mer, a grass field and a few sheds serve as a launch pad into a very new kind of warfare. The enemy's strategy is simple. Use altitude and darkness as armor, range and silence as surprise. The Zeppelin crews climb slowly, feel wind across the North Sea, pick the gap between searchlight beams and gun arcs, and drop their loads with a navigator's pencil and a timing watch. Not accurate, but terrifying. Not decisive, but unnerving. Night after night adds up. Warneford is 23. Born in 1891, trained fast in a service inventing itself faster, he moves like the rest of his generation, forward, because there is no reverse. His Moran Saulnier Type L, called a parasol because of the shoulder-mounted wing, has speed but not much. A Gnome rotary engine spins in front, dumping castor oil, dragging the airframe along at roughly the pace of a fast car. There's no synchronized gun. Forward fire means either an awkward Lewis gun angled to miss the propeller, or, more often, bombs and a carbine strapped to a cockpit side. Pilots tote wrenches, wire, matches. The era of radio and oxygen and self-sealing tanks hasn't started yet. It is a flying toolbox. By early June 1915, Zeppelin raids over Britain and the Channel had already delivered a pattern. Cities blacked out, citizens rattled, newspapers outraged, governments pressured. The raids didn't break morale, but they bent it. The Royal Flying Corps and the Royal Naval Air Service scrambled searchlights, guns, and patrols that learned on the job. Night fighting required new habits. Instrument flying didn't exist as a doctrine. Most pilots flew by the feel of wind on their face and the color of the horizon. Warneford belongs to that thin line of young men asked to solve a strategic problem in real time with a machine designed for daylight patrols. The tactical question feels simple enough. How do you kill a dirigible that flies higher and longer than you do? The real question hides inside it. How do you find it, climb over it, and strike it safely, at night, without any of the tools you designed today? The answer on June 6 will be crude, direct, and unforgettable. Shortly before 2 in the morning, Warneford sees the thing itself. LZ-37 is not a myth in a headline, but a shape. Length in football fields. Hydrogen cells arranged in compartments. Engine cars slung beneath like lanterns. A crew hard at work, helmsmen on a wheel, engineers with their heads in gauges, lookouts scanning for trouble that usually never comes. The airship is descending to bomb targets toward the coast. It has outrun gunners before. It has floated through a dozen beams and a dozen shells. It expects confusion below, not a determined aircraft above. Warneford begins to climb. The Moran's rate of climb is not dramatic. Every 100 feet feels expensive. He leans the mixture to chase scarce performance. He keeps the Zeppelin ahead and off to one side to avoid being seen from the gondolas. He waits. Patience is oxygen. With every 100 meters gained, the air grows thin, the engine rough, his breath short. He edges higher until he reaches the only metric that matters, above. He slides to a position over the envelope, just forward of the airship's centerline. Picture the geometry. One small craft superimposed on a drifting giant. Below, silk and hydrogen. Ahead, a long line that could be a horizon all its own. He steadies the Moran, opens the bomb rail, drops the first 20-pounder. It falls in a slow arc, a silent dot in a dark field. Nothing. He drops another, then another. 6 bombs total, spaced by judgment, not instruments. The 5th or 6th does what it must. Flame runs in a second. Hydrogen is not a bomb by itself. It needs air and a spark. But when air and spark find the gas in the wrong place, the reaction is sudden. The envelope blooms with fire. The Zeppelin's tail disappears in a roaring absence. The shock wave flips the Moran on its back. The engine chokes, and Warneford loses all control in violent daylight. He is, for a second, upside down over a man-made sun. The airplane falls into a spin, out of cloud, out of options. He fights the controls to break the rotation. At low altitude, a spin is a death sentence. He's high enough to have a margin, barely. The engine refuses. He glides toward the darker rectangle of a field he can make. He lands, he has to, in enemy territory, somewhere beyond the Allied trench line, in German-held Flanders. The night is loud again in his ears. The sky behind him glows orange, where LZ-37 dives toward the outskirts of Ghent, where it will crash into a convent school at Sint-Amansberg, killing most of its crew and starting fires. The city will remember for a generation. 1 airship, gone. 1 pilot, alone, with a dead engine and a short list of tools. This is the hinge of the story, not the bombs, the repair. Warneford slides out of the cockpit into wet grass, listening for voices, listening for boots, listening for anything that tells him he's already too late. Nothing yet. He moves quickly, methodically. The engine didn't fail from altitude alone. The shock likely shook a fuel pipe loose or cracked it. He opens the cowling. He sees the fracture. He has wire. He has a spanner. He has hands that work in darkness because they've had to before. He lashes the line, tightens, tests. He primes the engine. The gnome's cylinders cough, then catch. He runs to the tail, swings the plane around by main force to point it into the wind, and bounces back into the cockpit. 30-odd minutes. That's how long the difference between a triumph and a capture lasts, if you can make it. He takes off again, light with nearly empty tanks and lighter with relief, and drops as low as he dares until he reaches the front line. A flare pistol would be suicide. Navigation is seat of pants and memory. He follows the darker line of canals west, feels the air change as he crosses turbulence over trenches, sees the friendlier pattern of anti-aircraft fire behind him, and angles toward Dunkirk. At Saint-Pol-sur-Mer, the field is a scratched patch of dawn. He lands somewhere after 3. He climbs out wet with fuel and sweat and oil. The mechanics and watch officers crowd him. They've seen the sky light to the east. They've heard rumors. They wait for a claim, and then they get the proof. Ghent will confirm it by radio. The wreckage will lie in streets that many Allied pilots know well from peacetime. 1 airplane destroyed a Zeppelin in the air. That sentence ricochets. It crosses more borders in a day than most soldiers cross in a month. Newspapers write it in type 3 times the normal size. The German press concedes the loss with the formality of officialdom. The British public, living under blackout lamps for the first time in history, feels something open, vulnerability, yes, but also a method. The Admiralty and the War Office draw the same lesson. It's possible, which means it's repeatable, which means you can systematize it. Take a breath. Zoom back into the cockpit at 1:50 a.m. and note what wasn't available. Incendiary ammunition for the gun, oxygen gear to make high climbs sustainable, a coordinated ground-air search network with radar and plotting boards, interceptors with reliable performance margins. Those will come. They will come because stopping Zeppelins will become a state priority. In 1915, victory comes from a pilot who learns with his hands. Pause to track the airship's end. LZ-37's commander loses the tail, the frame puddles into flame. The descent isn't a glide, so much as a fall structured by physics and luck. The wreckage hits the convent. Windows burst for blocks. Most of the crew die. 1 survives, thrown clear, badly injured, and forever marked by flight in a machine both modern and fragile. The ground swallows stories and leaves a scar. Back at St. Pol, Warneford's superiors assemble the paperwork in a process made for infantry, but hurried into the air. Testimonies, coordinates, timings. He doesn't linger. Frontline airfields are not places where stories are polished. They're places where tomorrow's mission starts at dawn. Still, in the next days, he is shuffled from the damp sheds of Flanders to drier rooms with brass plaques. he receives the Victoria Cross. For the Royal Naval Air Service, it is a first of its kind, an aerial VC for a naval airman who closed with an airship and destroyed it by hand and nerve. Then comes the bitter inversion. 10 days later, June 17, 1915, outside Paris at Buc, he climbs into a new machine for a demonstration flight. A journalist rides with him. The aircraft is different, bigger and more delicate in its way. At 300 meters, it stalls or breaks. The wing-shedding lift in that instant, pilots dread even today. The ground comes up. The crash kills them both. The metal is still new. The nickname Zeppelin Killer is still fresh ink. The pilot is 23. It's tempting to make the story end with a single lesson, bravery or fate or the cruelty of chance, but the more precise truth is harder and better. Warneford's night above Ghent is both a singular feat and a signal. It reframes a campaign. To see that, we need the ledger of airship war. Before June 1915, Zeppelins seemed almost immune to fighter aircraft. Anti-aircraft guns could hit them. Weather could foil them. But airplanes? They lacked climb, lacked firepower, and lacked a doctrine. After June 1915, the numbers start to move. Aviators experiment with new ammunition designed to ignite gas bags, Pomeroy explosive bullets, Brock phosphorus, Buckingham incendiary. Searchlights and sound locators knit a net in the sky. Interceptors are held on heightened alert during likely windows of attack. Trains of thought become trains of trucks shifting mobile guns to points of entry. The Zeppelin is not suddenly obsolete, but it is suddenly hunted. Between 1915 and 1916, the tactical mix changes. In September 1916, Lieutenant William Leaf Robinson, an RFC pilot, brings down the German Army airship SL-11 over Cuffley using incendiary ammunition at night. London sees a fireball in the sky, and the myth of airship invulnerability bleeds out in a single descent. Others follow. By 1917, the cost curve bends steeply against the Zeppelin. The Navy and Army airship services still fly, still raid, still kill, but at higher cost for thinner effect. The German command shifts emphasis toward heavier-than-air bombers, which present a smaller target and different problems, but even those face a better organized defense. Numbers fix the scale of fear and response. Over the course of the war, German air raids on Britain kill about 1,400 people and injure more than 3,400. The raids twist civilian life into a shape new to industrial war. Blackout curtains, wardens, sirens, night services. The counter-system grows in parallel. Tens of thousands of spotters. Miles of sound mirror concrete along coasts. Columns of searchlights aligned with new plotting centers. Interceptor squadrons staged at rings beyond London. The speed of the raid meets the speed of response. The elegant curve of a Zeppelin meets the jagged line of a new defense graph. And somewhere in the middle of that change, a pilot kneeling in a dark field with a wrench shows the country what improvisation looks like. Return to the night he earned the nickname and notice three things in sequence. First, the geometry. He refuses the frontal engagement the Zeppelin expects. He goes above. That alone, climb patiently, close quietly, cut the fan of angles down to 1, turns offense into advantage. Second, the physics. Bombs, not bullets. At that time, bullets cannot reliably ignite the hydrogen inside the cells. Bombs can rupture more cells at once and find the oxygen mix needed for combustion. Warneford's choice exploits chemistry at scale. Third, the maintenance. An aircraft is not a sealed unit, but an object a pilot must understand. A line breaks, a pilot fixes it. A machine threatens to betray him, he brings it back with wire and effort. That is a different kind of skill from marksmanship. It's the skill of the mechanic warrior common to early aviation. The micro becomes macro. If one pilot can do this once, the system can do it again with planning. After June 1915, air defense cells carry clear instructions for handling alerts at night. Pilots train for higher altitude climbs. Ammunition labs get stable funding and urgent timelines. Night interceptors shape tactics around stepping above the target, attacking from the downwind side, and firing at a shallow angle across the top of the envelope to rake as many cells as possible. The last step is crucial. Attack angles that maximize the chance of ignition become doctrine. The process accelerates because success sells policy. Warneford himself doesn't write manuals or found training schools. He dies before the system can use him that way. But the shape of what he did, the act, its sequence, its tempo, travels farther than he does. The VC citation is bureaucratic in tone but crisp in implication. Locate, climb, attack, survive. It is a flowchart grafted on a medal. Consider the human scale again. In Ghent, the convent repairs its walls and moves students to other rooms. Wreckage is sold or scrapped, souvenirs cut from twisted girders. Families of the Zeppelin's crew receive news that mixes honor and finality. In England and France, people tuck clippings about the event into drawers. They will take them out later after the war and explain to children why a line about one airship mattered. The memory is not the whole war, but it is a chapter you can tell in the space of an evening. Now, turn to the numbers that morph from statistics into story arcs. Before June 1915, the idea of intercepting at night is experiment and bravado. After it, interception is planning. Before, anti-aircraft gunners fire shrapnel shells that pierce but don't spark. After, they receive tailored fuses and machine guns with belts built for ignition. Before, civilian authorities stumble through blackouts. After, they print regulations that become muscle memory. System replaces luck. That transformation is not dramatic in a second. It is cumulative and measurable across months, the kind of change war often hides in the middle of everything else. People call him the Zeppelin killer, a headline writer's phrase that sticks because it reduces complexity to a figure you can picture. He is not singular in courage, he is representative. Early war aviation is full of improvised victories and close escapes. But his night has a structure that a strategist can love. Reconnaissance, approach, positional advantage, strike at vulnerability, repair, withdrawal, confirmation. You can extend that structure outward to other campaigns and other technologies. In a war that often destroys initiative in trenches, here is a case where initiative carries decisive weight. There is an irony worth respecting. The same youth, adaptability, and physical courage that let him rewire his engine under threat also pull him into a demonstration flight in a different aircraft in peacetime skies, peacetime at least for the crowd below. The risks of early flight are not partisan. Training kills, test flights kill, demonstrations kill. Air shows even today recall Buck 1915 in their safety procedures. The tragedy doesn't subtract from the achievement, it sharpens its edges. It says plainly, the cost of learning a new domain of war can be paid in one life at a time. The larger campaign's trajectory confirms the thesis his action hints at. In 1915, aerial defense is clumsy. In 1916, it bites back. In 1917, it pushes airships to the margins. By 1918, the strategic weight of a Zeppelin raid is no longer worth the attrition, and the German command reallocates resources. It's not moral clarity that wins, it's process. Not one ace in the sky, but a system that turns isolated successes into repeatable outcomes. That's the hinge between the romantic and the real in air war. And yet, one scene persists. The field, the wire, the wrench, the engineer in uniform. Someone once said modern war is logistics married to violence. Here you see the marriage, quick and quiet and efficient, a pilot mechanic, fixing his own means of survival and return, turning spare wire into a second chance. By October 1916, British night fighting instructions read like a ritual shaped by hard experience. Beacons to guide returns, strict blackout boundaries, observers plotted on paper maps with pins moved by hand, signals to coordinate searchlights with the direction of the intercept. The line from Saint-Paul-sur-Mer to those papers is not straight, but it is traceable. Warneford's action sits in that lineage. This matters because memory is cruelly selective. The war's largest battles, Somme, Verdun, Passchendaele, cast long shadows that stretch across airfields and obliterate smaller points of light. But the birth of night air defense doesn't happen in a committee room. It happens here, in an airplane that was never designed for the job, flown by a man who brought patience to a dangerous sky. Many names build the system. This name opens a door. And so we return to the opening image. The Moran leans into a slow climb. The Zeppelin glows in glimpses. The pilot holds his breath in the cold and does not waste time on the drama of it. He finds the top of the parabola and, with practiced hands, turns a lever that releases a bomb you could carry in one hand. Then another. Then another. Nothing, 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 and then everything at once. Not indestructible giants, but vulnerable machines. Not easy victories, but carefully built opportunities. Not a miracle, but a method. By the time dawn pulls a gray line across the channel, the news is already shaping intentions. A pilot in another squadron hears it and calibrates his own climb with more confidence. An ammunition designer in a shed understands the target better and adjusts composition. A civil servant justifies budget on the strength of a single line in a report. Cause, effect, consequence. One line of action multiplied. What does it leave us with? A simple resolve sentence. A young man in a fragile aircraft took apart a strategic myth by climbing above it, dropping 6 small bombs, surviving the shock, landing in enemy territory, fixing his engine with the tools he had, and flying home to make the story real. The epilogue writes itself in brief. His Victoria Cross arrives quickly, signed, sealed, and announced. The French award the Légion d'honneur. Then the crash at Buc shuts the book on what could have been a career of further innovation. People say he died as he lived, flying, and the phrase is true but insufficient. He died in a time when flying itself was an experiment, every flight a trial of stresses only partially understood. That risk is part of the cost of the defense he helped invent. Years after the armistice, numbers settle on the page with little fanfare. Airship losses by year, sorties attempted, bombs dropped, lives saved by improved defense. The proportion of Zeppelins destroyed by aircraft rises. Civilians sleep more nights in shallow fear, not deep panic. The outcome is a collective achievement. But when you pick a name to tell the story of how it started to change, you pick his. Not because he was the only one, because he showed, graphically, how a single mind and pair of hands can expose a whole system's weak point and pull hard, close on a final contrast. The Zeppelin's shadow used to fall like a moving eclipse over towns. After 1916, it is the sudden flare of an airship falling that marks the night sky, a different terror, but one aligned more with defense than helplessness. The image switches polarity. The hunter glows, the hunted climbs. Night, June 6, 1915. Ghent. The convent walls, the grass field, the raw edge of a wrench, the sound of a rotary catching after doubt. It is not through overwhelming force that the air war turns here, but through patience, position, and a pilot's will. The one-line button, held a second longer than comfort, is this. In a war of machines, a human hand still matters most.